Hello everyone and welcome back to the complete explanation video of the Void Crawler. I am joined by Sancarn and Pi, and in this video we are going to explain the game mechanics and design of the second biggest project Sancarn and I have done in Minecraft Vanilla Survival.
First, we are going to explain the game mechanics we exploited in the process of designing this transportation system, and then we will analyze every component of the machine and tell you exactly why these components are necessary. But as always, we are going to start with the very basics and build up our understanding from the fundamental principles up.
We are going to divide this video into several parts. In section 1 we demonstrate the concept of ghost mode and the method of getting into it. In section 2 we introduce the notion of entity repulsion and how we can reproduce it in the latest version of Minecraft. In section 3 we remind ourselves of the underlying game mechanics of boats. In section 4 we present our very first design and reveal the problems we faced while testing it. And in section 5 we dish out the dirt, let the cat out of the bag and unveil our final design explaining exactly how everything works. Boats are processed both on the client side and the server side. When a boat is placed in a downward water stream, odd things happen to the boat.
Client side, the boat appears to ignore block collision, and so passes through the block beneath it. However, according to the server, the boat is just being pressed by the water stream against the block underneath it. This is normally not a massive problem, because the server resynchronizes with the client every 3 seconds. This means the boat, client side, quickly hops back up to the position of the boat, according to the server.
However, for some reason, when a player gets into the boat, the resynchronization stops happening. So when the player gets into the boat, the client thinks that the boat falls beneath the block, as before, but this time it does not rebound back up. Whereas the server, as normal, thinks you are above the block.
We call this ghost mode, because the client and server think the player is in 2 different positions. Thus, when a player is in ghost mode on SMP servers, other players see him where the server thinks he is, and not where his client thinks he is. From now on, we're going to call players who are in ghost mode ghost players, and their server-side counterparts riding players.
When a player or mob hits a riding player, a packet is sent from the server to the client. This packet contains the information of how much damage the player should take, in what direction he should be knocked in, and the name of the player or mob that hit him. It does this regardless of the position of or distance between the 2 entities. It is also important to note that most knockbacks hit the player upwards as well as to the side.
When a ghost player tries to throw an item out of his inventory, the item will be thrown out of the riding player's body instead of the ghost player's body. This allows us to send messages wirelessly from the ghost player to the riding player over huge distances instantly. When a ghost player crouches, he will teleport to the server-side location of the boat. However, if the boat is destroyed by arrows, the player will be teleported to his client-side location.
In previous versions of the game, before the update 1.3.1, entities were able to push players. If you put many entities into a single block and then went close to the entity cluster, you would be repelled with a very large force. However, this was removed in 1.3.1. Or was it?
No. It wasn't removed entirely. The entity repulsion still exists even in the current versions of Minecraft. However, now, the player is only repelled when he takes damage. Entities with larger hitboxes are preferred because they are easier to move around without interfering with their surroundings. This is why in our machine we used iron golems.
By combining the ghost mode glitch with the entity repulsion property, We are able to create an extremely powerful system that allows us to travel over a very large distance without having to do anything. This is the first fully AFK-able design, and because the player is in ghost mode, he won't even generate new chunks. These advantages makes this system the first affordable and most memory efficient method of reaching the Farlands in vanilla survival.
Even in ghost mode, you don't pass through the world border in the Farlands, so you won't have to worry about being transported too far. If our calculations are correct, with this design you will be able to reach the Farlands in 14 days completely AFK. However, the faster you are damaged, the quicker you will fly. Therefore, it is also possible to reach the Farlands in 4 days if you use Poison 2 potions and Golden Apples. The total number of poison potions you will need is approximately equal to 232 double chests full. As you may have realised by now, this type of ghost mode relies heavily on boat mechanics. So we have set up just a few experiments to show a couple of boat mechanics that were issues that we came across when designing this system.
The first thing to note is that boats have a 1.5 meter by 0.6 meter by 1.5 meter hitbox. Boats are extremely fragile. They often break if sent at high speeds towards a wall, which in this case would teleport the player to the server side location. So to prevent this from happening, we slow the boat down by letting it come to rest on the ground.
Boats cannot be pushed through other entity hitboxes, and other entities cannot be pushed through boat hitboxes. When a boat is being ridden by a player and falls below y equals -64, the client removes it, leaving the player to accelerate downwards until death. However, if the player is in unloaded chunks, he will not fall below y equals -65.
This was our first design. We have the golems and the boat in separate chambers. When the player gets inside the boat and enters ghost mode, the golems fall on top of him. The player rides off the edge of the world and the boat breaks. However, there was an issue with this design. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't get the entity Repulsion to work. It only appeared to work when the golems had been created after the player had entered ghost mode.
Our first hypothesis was that maybe we had to drop the golems onto the boat one at a time, because in testing we had used command block clocks to spawn lots of golems one at a time on top of the player. We created a colossal tower of golems to test this idea, and our testing concluded that this was not the reason, as we still could not achieve the entity Repulsion.
So after much thought and discussion, we came up with a second hypothesis. Perhaps the golems had to be unloaded before the player entered into ghost mode. We found this to be true. Our initial ideas were to use pistons to push the iron golems from the unloaded chunks into loaded ones. However, we then came up with the idea of using the riding player to load the golems by moving the boat with water streams. This had the added bonus of unloading the chunks where the ghost player sits, killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
This means the design can vary from server to server, since the loaded chunks is directly proportional to the view distance. The default view distance is equal to 10 and can be found in the server config files. For single player, the view distance can be changed by changing the render distance in your video settings. The first part is the ghost mode generator that you have seen countless times in this video.
When the player enters ghost mode, he will fall through the block beneath him and be able to press the button on the underside of the ghost mode generator.
The button pulls a fence block up, pushing the riding player into the boat road. The boat floats server side along the boat road, loading the chunks containing the iron golems and unloading the chunks around the ghost player.
When the riding player arrives at the machine, the boat runs over a pressure plate which, after a delay, makes the iron golems fall into the riding player's hitbox.
As the player is damaged, he will be repelled by the golems roughly 50 blocks in the X and Z directions. The type of damage we are using is hunger damage, because it can be equally negated with a beacon, providing the regeneration effect, and therefore can be used for total AFK travel. However, this is fairly slow, so alternatively the player can use Poison 2 potions and Golden Apples to travel a very large distance in a very small amount of time.
When the player throws an item, it will be detected by hoppers, and the iron golems will be pushed out and into the spiral escalator and reset back into position. The pistons around the edges are just to stop the iron golems of getting stuck in the corners. Then a named zombie is dropped down onto the player and continually attacks the player. As the zombie attacks the player is knocked upwards client side. This occurs until the client reaches y = 0.
When the player throws out another item, the zombie is dropped and picked up by a minecart, reset in his default position, and arrows are fired at the boat, teleporting the player to his client-side location. The player may or may not experience a large amount of server lag during this process, depending on whether the chunks the player is teleporting into have been loaded or not.
With a few stacks or so of ender pearls, the player can easily get up to the surface. And that concludes how this machine works.